My wife's friend's mother called 911 on me for kidnapping my own son while I pushed him on the swings, then told police she saw me drag him from a van. When I tried to stand up for myself, she smirked and said, "My son will hear about how you almost let this criminal go." I stayed silent. That was 10 months ago. This morning, she was let out of her house in handcuffs. When did someone's racism actually put you in danger? So, I'm staring down the barrel of a police officer's gun at our neighborhood park, accused of kidnapping my own son, all because some racist grandma saw me, a black man with a white kid, and called 911. 5 minutes ago, my son Cody was laughing on the swings. Now he's screaming as two cops have me on my knees, hands behind my head, while this old white lady keeps yelling that she saw the whole thing, and I'm probably part of a trafficking ring. You'd think this was 1930s Alabama, not 2024 on some random Tuesday, but here I am with an officer's shaking hand pointing his weapon at me while my son cries, "That's my daddy," and grandma insists the poor child must be brainwashed or drugged. My son Cody came into my life 8 months ago after the adoption finally went through. My wife Sharkeisha and I had been fostering him for 2 years, trying to help this kid heal after what he'd been through. His birth parents lost custody when he was 3. Severe neglect, meth house, found him alone for 2 days eating dry cereal off the floor. He bounced through 3 homes before us, each one sending him back because of his night terrors and meltdowns. We're both black, Cody is white, and the social workers kept asking if we were prepared for the challenges, like love needs a color match. But slowly he started trusting us, stopped flinching when we moved too fast, started calling us mommy and daddy without anyone prompting him. Something about how he'd finally grab my hand instead of backing away just felt right, you know, like he was learning family could mean safety. It was just me and Cody for our boys' day. Got to our usual spot where he loves the tall swings, finally comfortable enough to play without checking where I was every 30 seconds. People would stare whether it was me or Sharkeisha with him, but he'd just run around laughing and calling for daddy to watch him go down the slide, completely oblivious to how much we didn't match in some people's eyes. The problem started when the racist grandma arrived with her granddaughter about 10 minutes into our park visit. Her kid ran off to play while she sat on the bench, but I could feel her eyes tracking us. Cody ran over to show me a cool stick he found and gave me a hug, and that's when she stood up like she'd seen a crime. She walked over all casual at first, asking Cody if he was okay, if he knew me, where his mommy was. He just said, "Daddy's pushing me on the swings," and went back to playing, but she didn't leave it alone. She pulled out her phone, and I heard her voice getting louder, more dramatic with each word. "There's a black man here with a white child. The boy seems scared. I think it's a kidnapping in progress. He keeps touching the child. Hurry, please." Then she started adding details that never happened. Told them she saw me drag him from a van, that he was trying to run away from me, that she heard me threaten him. When the cops showed up in less than 3 minutes, she ran to them waving her arms, tears suddenly streaming down her face, pointing at me like I was America's most wanted while shouting, "That's him. He's trying to take that baby." When the cops finally let me speak after putting me in cuffs, I told them Cody was my adopted son, and my papers were in my car. The second I said, "I need to get something from my vehicle," grandma started screaming, "He's going for a weapon!" And both officers drew their guns again, yelling at me to stop moving. I had to explain, face pressed against the hood, that the adoption papers were in my glove compartment while they debated whether to let me get them. One officer went to my car himself, while the other kept his hand on his holster, grandma narrating the whole time about how they always have fake documents, and I'm probably armed. The cop came back with my folder, adoption certificate, insurance cards, school forms, photos from his birthday party, Christmas morning, first day of kindergarten. Meanwhile, grandma kept insisting they were forgeries, demanding they call the FBI about trafficking rings, actually saying, "These people are sophisticated criminals," while I'm cuffed in my Saturday dad outfit of cargo shorts and the Paw Patrol shirt Cody picked out. They questioned Cody away from me. "What's your daddy's name? Where do you live? What did you eat for breakfast?" Cody, still crying but trying to be brave, goes, "James Wilson, 423 Oak Street, and daddy made me dinosaur pancakes with extra syrup." Then he asked the cop, "Why are you hurting my daddy? He didn't do anything bad." The officer reviewing my documents looked at his partner, and I could see the shift happening, from suspicious to uncomfortable to embarrassed. The officers uncuffed me and started to apologize when grandma walked up to the senior cop and whispered something in his ear. His whole demeanor changed, and he immediately said, "Actually, we need to verify this further," and told his partner to cuff me again. Brian started screaming as they bent me back over the hood, and grandma had this smug look while saying loudly enough for me to hear, "My son Deputy Chief Williams will hear about how you almost let this criminal go." But then something weird happened. The officer cuffing me whispered, "Play along, trust me," while making them extra loose. Turns out the Williams family had been running the department like their personal kingdom for years. 3 sons, 2 nephews, all cops, all dirty, all racist as hell. Internal Affairs had been trying to nail them but needed hard evidence. The metal felt weird around my wrists, way looser than before, and Torres kept moving his hand near my pocket where my phone was still recording everything. Dorothy kept going on about how we steal white babies and sell them, her voice getting louder with each word while Torres mouthed something that looked like record at me. His partner was already on the radio calling for backup, and I could hear sirens getting closer, even though we were just at a park with a kid and his dad. Torres positioned himself between me and Dorothy, so she couldn't see him tap my pocket again, making sure I understood to keep that phone going. A black SUV pulled up fast, tires squealing, and out stepped this huge guy in a police uniform with more medals than a general. Dorothy ran right to him calling him Bobby and pointing at me, and that's when I realized this was Deputy Chief Williams himself, showing up for what should have been nothing. He looked at me like I was dirt on his shoe, and told Torres and his partner to investigate this trafficking situation thoroughly, while Cody screamed for me from where another officer was holding him back. Williams walked over slow, taking his time, asking Dorothy to tell him everything while she made up more lies about seeing me grab Cody from some white woman earlier. My phone kept recording in my pocket, as Williams said we needed to take this very seriously, because child trafficking was a major problem in Springfield. I managed to text Sharkeisha with my hands behind my back, just typing 911 park now, before Williams noticed and told Torres to secure my phone as evidence. Torres took it, but slipped it back in my pocket when Williams turned away to talk to Dorothy again. More cops showed up and parents were gathering around with their phones out recording everything, while Dorothy kept adding details that never happened. Sharkeisha's car screeched into the parking lot, and she jumped out running toward us, but Williams stepped right in front of her demanding identification. She pulled out her wallet showing her license and Cody's insurance card, but Williams said anyone could fake documents these days. Dorothy said loud enough for everyone to hear that we probably hired actors to play family for the kid, and some parents gasped like they believed her. Williams told Torres to transport me to the station for questioning, even though my adoption papers were right there in the officer's hand. Torres volunteered volunteered quick to drive me, and as we walked to his patrol car, he leaned close and said, IA needs my help because this family was dirty as hell. The back of the patrol car smelled like puke and pine trees, and Torres waited until we pulled away before talking real quiet about how Internal had been building a case for 2 years. He said 3 black families filed complaints about fake arrests at parks, but the witnesses always disappeared or changed their stories after Williams got to them. He kept checking his mirror to make sure nobody was following us while explaining how Dorothy was Williams's mother-in-law and called him every time she saw a black person with a white kid. The station was only 10 minutes away, but Torres drove slow, telling me to keep recording everything that happens inside because they needed evidence. Williams was already there when we arrived, must have taken a shortcut, and he personally walked me to the interrogation room asking how much I paid for the boy. My phone in my pocket caught him saying people like me shouldn't be allowed to adopt white children, that it wasn't natural, while he flipped through my adoption papers like they were fake. He kept asking where I really got Cody, how much the birth parents sold him for, if I was part of a larger ring stealing white babies. After 2 hours of the same questions over and over, the door burst open, and Brian came in wearing his lawyer suit talking about civil rights violations. Williams tried to block him, but Brian already had an emergency petition filed with Judge Harrison, who wasn't one of Williams's buddies. They argued for another hour while Torres made copies of all my papers, and when Williams stepped out to take a call, Torres slipped me a business card with just a phone number. He whispered to call tonight and delete the number right after, then went back to standing by the door like nothing happened. 4 hours after getting arrested at a park with my son, Williams finally had to let me go because Judge Harrison called the station himself. Dorothy's quick shift from concerned grandmother to full-blown conspiracy theorist makes me wonder what's really driving her beyond just prejudice. The way she instantly created this whole trafficking narrative with made-up details like seeing James drag Cody from a van suggests there's something deeper going on here than just casual racism. Sharkeisha and Cody were waiting in the lobby, and Cody grabbed my hand so tight it hurt, asking why that grandma lied about me. Other cops smirked as we walked out, one saying something about us people always playing victim, but I just kept walking with my family. That night after Cody finally fell asleep, I called the number Torres gave me, and this woman answered saying she was Detective Aisha Patel from Internal Affairs. She explained they'd been tracking the Williams family's pattern of targeting black families in white neighborhoods, using Dorothy as their scout to manufacture probable cause. She said my recording from today was exactly what they needed, that Williams saying people like me shouldn't adopt white kids was the smoking gun they'd been waiting for. Detective pulled out a thick folder and started showing me reports. 6 different 911 calls over 2 years, all from Dorothy about black parents with white kids at parks, stores, schools. Each report had the same pattern, her calling when deputy was on duty, him responding personally, families getting questioned for hours before being released. The detective pointed to addresses showing all 6 families moved within 3 months of their incidents, couldn't take the harassment anymore. She showed me social media posts Dorothy made after each call, talking about protecting children from predators, getting hundreds of likes from people who had no idea what really happened. I remembered my phone was still recording in my pocket from the park, and pulled it out to stop it. The screen showed it had been going for over an hour, capturing everything including when they put me in the patrol car. I hit play and started scrolling through, hearing Dorothy's voice telling the cops I grabbed Cody from a van that never existed. Then I heard something that made my stomach drop. Deputy's voice real quiet telling officer to lose my adoption papers when they got back to the station. His exact words were clear as day on the recording, saying this problem needs to go away like the others, that people like me shouldn't be allowed to adopt white kids. Detective's eyes went wide when she heard it, and she immediately asked me to send her the file. The next morning, I woke up to Sharkeisha shaking me, telling me to come look at the car. All 4 tires were slashed, and someone had spray-painted MOVE across the windshield in red paint. She wanted to call the cops, but I reminded her that meant calling deputy's department, the same people who did this or let it happen. We stood there in our driveway while neighbors walked by pretending not to see, some probably thinking we deserved it after whatever lies Dorothy was spreading. Cody came downstairs for school but started crying when Sharkeisha tried to get him dressed, kept saying the mean grandma would take him away. He grabbed onto my leg and wouldn't let go, shaking and begging us not to make him leave the house. Sharkeisha called her boss to say she couldn't come in, and I opened my laptop to work from the kitchen table. We took turns sitting with Cody on the couch, trying to get him to eat something, watching cartoons to distract him from his fear. Brian came over that afternoon and said he was filing a complaint with the state attorney general about my false arrest. He'd already written everything up, had the forms ready, just needed my signature to make it official. 2 hours after he submitted it online, my phone rang from a blocked number. The voice was muffled, but the message was clear. Drop the complaint or child services would get an interesting tip about our family. They said they knew where we lived, where Cody went to school, where Sharkeisha worked, everything about our life. 3 days later, I was taking out the trash when I saw Dorothy standing on our sidewalk with 2 other women. They were holding signs that said, "Save Cody" and "Trafficking Victim Lives Here," all 3 recording with their phones. Dorothy was talking loud to her phone about how she was standing outside the house where an innocent white child was being held. The other women were nodding and adding comments about how suspicious it was that we hadn't left the house in days. I went back inside and watched through the window as more people stopped to see what was happening. Within an hour, the local Facebook group was blowing up with posts about the protest, people taking sides without knowing any facts. Dorothy had posted edited videos from the park that cut out everything except me holding Cody while he cried. She added captions saying I was hurting him, that witnesses saw me drag him to my car, complete lies that people were believing. Our neighbor from 2 houses down commented that we seemed nice, but you never really know about people. Another neighbor said she'd seen strange cars at our house, which was just Brian and my mom visiting, but it sounded sinister online. The comments got worse as more people joined in, suggesting someone should do something, asking why CPS wasn't involved, demanding action. Brian called me that night with news that made everything make sense. He'd been digging into Dorothy's background and found out she was married to Carl Brennan, the retired police chief who ran the department before deputy. Deputy was Carl's son-in-law, married to Dorothy's daughter, making this a whole family operation going back decades. They had relatives all through the system, 2 cousins in the DA's office, Dorothy's brother on city council, connections everywhere. The next morning, someone knocked on our door, and I opened it to find a social worker with a CPS badge. She said they'd received a report about potential child abuse and needed to do a wellness check on Cody. Her hands were shaking as she showed me her credentials and mentioned that deputy had personally called to express his concerns. Sharkeisha came to the door holding Cody's hand, but he took one look at the social worker and started backing away. The woman asked if she could come in and speak with Cody privately about whether he felt safe in our home. Cody lost it completely, screaming, "Don't take me away," over and over, clinging to Sharkeisha like his life depended on it. The social worker was writing in her notebook, putting down concerning behavior while we tried to explain about his past trauma. Sharkeisha told her about the 3 failed placements before us, the night terrors, how long it took him to trust us. But the woman kept writing, asking why he was so scared if nothing bad was happening in our home. The social worker finally left after 2 hours of questions, but not before telling us she'd be back for surprise visits. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number asking me to meet at the coffee shop on 5th Street. When I got there, Officer Torres was sitting in the back corner wearing civilian clothes, looking around nervously before sliding a folder across the table. He told me Williams had done this to 7 other families, all mixed race or adoption cases, and he'd been documenting everything for internal affairs, but needed someone on the outside to help. The folder had dates, case numbers, complaint reports that got buried, and photos of families who'd been forced to leave town after months of harassment. Torres kept checking his phone and the door, saying if anyone saw him talking to me, his career was over, but he couldn't watch another family get destroyed. He wrote his personal number on a napkin and left through the back exit, leaving me with evidence that made my stomach turn. A week after the park incident, Sharkeisha got called into her supervisor's office at the hospital, where 3 formal complaints had been filed about her mental stability and fitness to work with children. The complaints came from concerned citizens who claimed they'd witnessed her unstable behavior, all signed by members of Dorothy's Facebook group that was now up to 300 members posting about us daily. Her supervisor didn't believe the complaints, but said the hospital board was demanding an investigation, which meant mandatory psych evaluation and possible suspension. That same day, my boss called me into his office looking uncomfortable, explaining that the company had received dozens of calls claiming I was under investigation for child trafficking. He knew it was garbage, but our biggest client threatened to pull their contract if I stayed on the project, so he had to put me on administrative leave until things calmed down. My paycheck would continue for now, but I couldn't come to the office or contact clients, basically making me unemployed while they tried to save face. Then Cody's previous foster family called us out of nowhere, the ones who had him for 6 months before us, saying someone identifying themselves as a private investigator had called asking weird questions. They wanted to know if we'd ever offered them money for Cody, if we'd pressured them to give him up, if they'd noticed any concerning behavior while we were fostering him. The foster mom was crying on the phone, scared they were going to lose their current foster kids over whatever lies were being spread. 2 days later, Detective Patel called with her voice tight, warning me that Williams had found out about the internal affairs investigation and was going full attack mode. She'd intercepted a memo between Williams and the district attorney's office, suggesting they had enough evidence to charge me with custodial interference, claiming our adoption papers might be fraudulent. The DA hadn't signed off yet, but Williams was pushing hard, calling in favors and threatening to go public about the department not protecting children if they didn't act. Brian came over that night with his laptop, showing me a website he'd found called Springfield Families for Justice that Williams had been running for years. It had a private forum where he coordinated campaigns against families he targeted, complete with templates for complaints, which agencies to contact, and how to word accusations to trigger investigations. Dorothy's got a whole family tree of hate with branches in every government office. Talk about keeping bigotry in the family business. This isn't just one bad apple, it's the whole rotten orchard working together to terrorize innocent families. Brian had already reached out to 3 other families listed on the site, and they all wanted to meet. 10 days after the park incident, we gathered in Brian's basement with 3 other families who'd been through Williams's harassment campaign. There was the Johnsons, a black couple with an adopted Korean daughter, the Garcias with their biracial kids, and the Nguyens who'd fostered their white nephew after his parents died. Each family told the same story of false accusations, CPS visits, mysterious complaints to employers, and Dorothy's group spreading lies on social media until they either moved away or gave up fighting. One mom, Denise Johnson, broke down completely when she described how her daughter still wakes up screaming about police taking daddy away. Her husband lost his teaching job after Dorothy's group posted on the school's Facebook page calling him a predator who shouldn't be around children, using the police report from their park incident as proof. Even after he was cleared the damage was done, parents demanded he be fired, and the school board caved to the pressure. Right in the middle of everyone sharing their stories, my phone rang with Sharkeisha sobbing that Cody's school wouldn't release him to her. They claimed they'd received an official custody order stating only biological parents could pick him up, which made no sense since his biological parents had their rights terminated years ago. She was standing in the principal's office with Cody crying behind the desk, terrified he was being taken away again. Brian and I raced to the school where the principal, looking smug, showed us a document on official letterhead that Deputy Williams had personally delivered that morning. Brian pulled out his phone and called his law firm, putting it on speaker so the principal could hear him threatening a lawsuit for unlawful detention of a minor. The principal's face went white as Brian explained the legal ramifications of accepting fraudulent documents and keeping a child from his legal guardians. They finally released Cody, but he was beyond hysterical, clinging to me and screaming the same words over and over that he'd said when CPS showed up, "Don't take me away, please don't take me away." That night, after we'd finally gotten Cody to sleep, a brick came crashing through our living room window with a note tied to it. The message was simple, just 4 words that made my blood run cold. Final warning, leave everything. Sharkeisha found Cody 20 minutes later hiding in his bedroom closet, rocking back and forth with his hands over his ears, not responding when we called his name. He'd wet himself, something that hadn't happened in over a year, and when I tried to pick him up, he started hitting me, screaming no, no, no like he had during his first weeks with us. The therapist had warned us that trauma responses could resurface under extreme stress, but seeing him lose all the progress we'd made, reverting to that scared little boy who'd been failed by so many adults, felt like someone ripping my heart out. The next morning, Torres called me from a blocked number and asked me to meet him at a truck stop outside town. When I got there, he was sitting in his personal car looking nervous as hell and handed me a flash drive without saying much. Back home, I plugged it in and found 6 different dashcam videos from the past 3 years showing Dorothy meeting with Williams in parking lots before making 911 calls. In each video, Williams would point at papers while Dorothy nodded and repeated phrases back to him like she was memorizing lines. The timestamps showed every call happened within an hour of these meetings, and the transcripts matched word for word what Dorothy reported. That night, Sharkeisha and I sat at our kitchen table after putting Cody to bed and talked about maybe leaving Springfield altogether. She'd gotten job offers from hospitals in other states before, but we'd always turned them down because this was home. The problem was Cody's adoption was only final in Illinois, and moving meant starting the whole process over in a new state. We could lose him if his birth parents' rights got reinstated, or if another family challenged our adoption during the transfer. 2 weeks after the park incident, Brian filed our federal civil rights lawsuit against the city, and within 3 hours my mortgage mortgage company called. They said someone had reported irregularities in my application from 3 years ago, and they needed to review all my financial records immediately. The woman on the phone sounded apologetic, but said failure to provide documents within 48 hours could trigger foreclosure proceedings. Brian found out Williams had a nephew who worked at the mortgage company, and suddenly the timing made perfect sense. The next week, Dorothy showed up at our house with about 20 people carrying candles and signs about saving kidnapped children. They stood on the sidewalk singing hymns and holding up their phones to live stream while Cody watched terrified from his bedroom window. Our neighbors came out to see what was happening, and Dorothy told everyone who would listen that we were holding a white child hostage. The cops showed up but said it was a peaceful protest on public property, so they couldn't make him leave. Cody wouldn't go near the windows for days after that and started sleeping in our bed again. Then this reporter from the Chicago Tribune called me saying she'd been investigating police corruption in small cities for 2 years. Naomi Smith had a whole file on Williams and his family's control of the Springfield Police Department. She'd tracked patterns of false arrests, evidence tampering, and intimidation tactics across dozens of cases. She wanted to meet but warned me to be careful because Williams had contacts everywhere, including the state police. The next day, Sharkeisha got called into her supervisor's office at the hospital where she'd worked for 8 years without a single complaint. They'd received multiple calls about her mental stability and threats that Dorothy's group would protest the children's ward if they didn't suspend her. The administrator looked sick about it but said the hospital board was worried about patient safety if protesters showed up. Sharkeisha was put on unpaid leave pending a psychological evaluation that could take months to complete. We had to start Cody in therapy because he'd completely stopped talking about what happened at the park. The therapist said he was showing signs of re-traumatization and warned us that continued stress could undo years of attachment work. During sessions, he'd just color pictures of police cars over and over in black crayon until the paper ripped. She said his regression was getting worse and he might need inpatient treatment if things didn't improve soon. Torres risked his job to tell me what else he'd found in the department's computer system. Williams had been illegally accessing sealed juvenile records trying to find anything about my past he could use. He'd also pulled Sharkeisha's medical records from when she had postpartum depression 5 years ago after a miscarriage. Torres had screenshots of the access logs showing Williams' search for terms like drug use, mental illness, and criminal history. 3 weeks after the park incident, we got an official letter from the DA's office that made my hands shake. They were considering charging me with false imprisonment of a minor for preventing Cody from going to his rightful guardians during the park incident. The letter said Dorothy had provided evidence that I physically restrained the child when he tried to seek help from concerned citizens. It was complete bullshit, but the DA was Williams' golf buddy, and suddenly we were looking at me possibly going to prison. Brian discovered Williams was trying to get our federal lawsuit transferred to his cousin Patricia Williams Henderson, who was a judge in the circuit court. She'd ruled in favor of the police department in every excessive force case for the past decade. Brian said the corruption was like a spider web with Williams' family members in every part of the system. He started filing motions to keep the case in federal court, but warned me they had judges there too. The next morning, Detective Patel called me with something that made my stomach drop. She'd been digging through city financial records and found something nobody was supposed to see. Dorothy wasn't just some random racist grandma at the park that day. She was getting paid $500 every time she called 911 about a suspicious person through something Williams called the Community Safety Initiative. The city had been paying her and 12 other people to report black families in white neighborhoods. She showed me the spreadsheet on her laptop with Dorothy's name and 37 payments over the past 2 years. Each call had a case number, a target description that always mentioned race, and a payment confirmation from the police department's discretionary fund. Dorothy had made $18,000 being professionally racist with our tax money. Detective Patel took everything to the FBI field office that afternoon, and they opened a federal corruption case within hours. The agent warned me this could take years to prosecute, while Williams kept his badge and gun the whole time. 3 days later, Officer Torres showed up at my door at midnight looking scared. He asked if we could talk in my car because he didn't trust my house wasn't bugged. He'd been wearing a wire for internal affairs for 3 months and had recordings of Williams talking about his plan to clean up our neighborhood. Williams actually used the words ethnic cleansing in a conversation with his lieutenants about forcing black families out through arrests and harassment. Torres was testifying to a federal grand jury next week and wanted me to know things might get dangerous once Williams found out. I'm really curious about Torres wearing that wire for 3 months. Seems like he knew something was deeply wrong way before this park incident even happened. The timing of Dorothy getting paid $500 per racist call through official city funds makes me wonder how many other departments have these shadow programs nobody talks about. He gave me a burner phone and told me to call if anything weird happened. A month after the park incident, our family was falling apart in ways I didn't expect. Cody wouldn't leave the house without both me and Sharkeisha together. His kindergarten teacher called to say he was refusing to play with any white kids at recess. When she asked him why, he said their grandmas might lie about his daddy and make the police come. He'd started wetting the bed again after being dry for 6 months. The therapist said he was showing signs of racial trauma at 6 years old. Sharkeisha switched to night shifts at the hospital to avoid Dorothy's group of protesters who showed up every day shift. She found out 3 other black nurses had quit in the past year after Dorothy's crew followed them home and left threatening notes. The hospital administration knew but did nothing because Dorothy's husband donated $50,000 to their new wing. One nurse moved to another state after someone spray painted the N-word on her car. Brian called me panicking on a Tuesday afternoon saying Williams just pulled him over for a broken taillight that wasn't broken. I grabbed my phone and raced to Main Street where I saw 3 cop cars surrounding Brian's Honda. Williams was making Brian do a field sobriety test even though it was 2 in the afternoon and Brian doesn't drink. That's when I noticed a young woman filming everything from across the street. She had her phone on a tripod and was narrating what was happening to her followers. Williams cuffed Brian and said he was under arrest for resisting when Brian hadn't moved a muscle. The woman kept filming as they searched his car and found a bag of white powder that Williams pulled from his own pocket first. She zoomed in on Williams planting the evidence and her viewers saw everything. Within an hour, her live stream had 50,000 people watching Williams frame my best friend. The video hit Twitter and TikTok that night with the hashtag Springfield Corruption trending by morning. People started sharing their own stories about Williams in the comments. A Latino family said he arrested their teen son for gang activity because he wore a red shirt. A black veteran shared how Williams had him face down at gunpoint during a traffic stop while his Purple Heart sat on the dashboard. 15 years of victims came forward with stories that made mine look tame. Dorothy must have seen the backlash coming because she changed tactics fast. She filed paperwork with family court claiming she was a concerned citizen advocate who needed emergency custody of Cody. She wrote that we were brainwashed whitewashing him against white people and turning him into a racist. She actually claimed we were the ones traumatizing him by making him hate his own race. The judge who signed the emergency hearing order was Patricia Williams Henderson, Deputy Chief Williams' cousin. The custody hearing was set for next week, and my lawyer said we needed character witnesses fast. He reached out to Cody's previous foster families, and all three agreed to testify by video about how broken Cody was before us. The first family said he wouldn't speak for 2 months and hid food under his bed. The second family described him screaming for hours every night and hitting himself when he made mistakes. The third family talked about finding him eating from the trash because he didn't believe meals were really for him. They all said the same thing about how different he was now. On the day of the hearing, Dorothy showed up with a lawyer who kept calling us the perpetrators like we were criminals. She testified that she'd observed clear signs of abuse and manipulation at the park. She claimed Cody looked terrified and was obviously coached to call me daddy. She said she had 30 years of experience as a Sunday school teacher, qualifying her to recognize child abuse. When it was Cody's turn to talk to the judge, my lawyer had prepared him, but we were still nervous. This 6-year-old kid stood up in his little suit and looked right at the judge. He said the mean grandma was lying about everything. He told the judge that before mommy and daddy he didn't have anyone who loved him. He said his old houses were scary, but now he felt safe. Then he looked at Dorothy and said she was the one who made him scared of white people because she lied to the police about his daddy being bad. The judge thanked Cody and let him go back to sit with Sharkeisha while Dorothy's face turned red and her lawyer started whispering fast in her ear. 6 weeks passed after that day in court, and everything started moving real quick when Torres finally went to the grand jury with a wire recording hidden in his pocket from 3 months back. He sat in that big room with 23 people staring at him and pressed play on his phone where you could hear Deputy Chief Williams clear as day, telling him to plant drugs in the Wilson family car next time he saw them. The recording kept going with Williams saying how he'd done this to 12 other black families over the years, and nobody ever caught on because the whole department had his back. Torres had more recordings too, ones where Williams talked about paying Dorothy $300 every time she called in a fake report on black families at the park. The grand jury members kept looking at each other with their mouths open as Torres played recording after recording of Williams and his nephews, planning which families to target next. That same afternoon, the FBI showed up at the police station with 15 agents wearing those blue windbreakers and started carrying out boxes of files while officers stood around looking confused. Williams got put on administrative leave right away, but his buddies weren't going down without a fight, and the next morning the police union president was on Channel 7 calling it a witch hunt. He stood there in his dress uniform saying Torres was a troubled officer who made up lies because he got passed over for promotion, and that the FBI was attacking good cops who kept the community safe. Meanwhile, I was stuck working from my laptop at the kitchen table because 3 of my biggest clients dropped me after seeing my name in the news about the park incident. Our savings account was down to almost nothing after paying Brian's legal fees, and Sharkeisha started looking at houses for sale in cheaper neighborhoods. I watched her circle listings in the paper with tears in her eyes, knowing we might have to leave the home where Cody finally felt safe. Dorothy wasn't done either, and she organized this huge rally downtown with signs saying, "Support our blue" and "Stop the lies," that brought out 200 people. Counter-protesters showed up too, mostly black families that Williams had targeted over the years, and they had their own signs with pictures of their kids who got taken by CPS based on fake reports. The whole thing almost turned into a riot when Dorothy's group started pushing into the counter-protesters, and somebody threw a water bottle that hit a mom holding her baby. State police had to come in with shields to separate everyone, while news helicopters circled overhead filming the whole mess. The FBI kept digging through the police files and found evidence that Williams had been changing reports for years, always making black suspects sound more dangerous than they really were. They found 12 cases just like ours where black parents got accused of kidnapping or abusing their own kids based on calls from Dorothy and her friends. The real kicker was when they checked Dorothy's bank records and found $30,000 in deposits over 3 years, always right after she made one of her calls to 911. Detective Patel called me at 11 at night with her voice shaking, saying Williams was about to run because they found out he'd been moving money to Costa Rica and had a flight booked for tomorrow. She said the FBI tracked down his offshore accounts with almost $500,000 stolen from evidence lockers and drug busts he'd skimmed over the years. The next night I watched the news as they showed Williams getting arrested at the airport with his suitcase full of cash while trying to board a plane to San Jose. At the exact same time, another team of FBI agents knocked on Dorothy's door and arrested her in her nightgown, while all her neighbors stood on their lawns recording with their phones. Cody was watching cartoons when he saw the police cars outside and ran to the window just in time to see Dorothy getting put in the back of a cop car. He looked up at me with those big eyes and asked if the mean grandma was going to jail for lying about daddy being bad. I just pulled him close and held him tight, not knowing how to explain that sometimes bad people pretend to be good and it takes a long time for the truth to come out. Williams getting arrested set off this huge chain reaction where 3 more officers got arrested, including his nephew, who was caught on tape destroying evidence. The police chief resigned the next day, saying he had no idea what was happening in his own department, and the city council called an emergency meeting about restructuring the whole police force. Brian filed new lawsuits against the city, the police department, and Dorothy personally for conspiracy and violation of our civil rights. The city's insurance company started freaking out when they saw they might have to pay millions in damages and sent lawyers to try to settle everything quick before it got worse. 3 weeks later, we started going to this support group at the community center for families who'd been messed up by police stuff. The room had those metal folding chairs set up in a circle and smelled like old coffee and cleaning supplies. Other parents sat there with their kids playing in the corner while everyone took turns talking about what happened to them. Cody ran off to play with blocks with the other kids, while Sharkeisha held my hand so tight it hurt. Dorothy traded her Sunday school credentials for federal charges, while Williams discovered Costa Rica doesn't accept evidence locker money as currency. Who knew crime doesn't pay when the FBI starts following your paper trail to nightgowns and airport arrests? This one mom talked about how the cops arrested her husband in front of their kids for a broken taillight that wasn't even broken. Another dad described getting pulled over 17 times in 1 year just driving to work. The therapist running the group kept passing around tissues as people cried through their stories. 2 months after the park thing, this reporter named Naomi, who'd been following our case, published this huge series of articles about corruption in our police department. She'd spent weeks digging through records and interviewing people who'd been harassed by Williams and his crew. The articles showed up on the front page 3 days in a row with pictures of all the families they'd targeted. Her editor submitted it for some big journalism award, and the Department of Justice started calling people for interviews. Dorothy's trial started on a rainy Monday morning, and the courthouse was packed with reporters and people people from both sides. She showed up in this conservative blue suit, trying to look like somebody's sweet grandma instead of the racist who almost got me killed. The prosecutor stood up and told the jury they had recordings of Dorothy teaching other women how to make fake 911 calls about black families at parks. They played the audio right there in court, and you could hear Dorothy's voice clear as day explaining how to sound scared and what words to use. She was telling them to always mention trafficking and say the kids looked drugged so the cops would show up faster. The second day, Sharkeisha had to testify about how Cody went from finally trusting us to having nightmares every single night. She described finding him hiding in his closet with a baseball bat because he thought the police were coming to take Daddy away. The prosecutor showed pictures Cody had drawn in therapy of police officers as monsters with big teeth chasing our family. 3 jurors started wiping their eyes when Sharkeisha talked about Cody, asking if we could move somewhere where there weren't any white grandmas. Torres took the stand next and spent 2 hours describing how Williams ran the department like his personal kingdom. He explained how Williams gave bonuses to officers who arrested the most black people each month and punished anyone who wouldn't play along. Torres had secretly recorded Williams at a department meeting, saying they needed to keep certain people in their place. The FBI agent testified that Torres had been wearing a wire for 6 months, gathering evidence before the park incident happened. Williams tried to cut a deal the next week, offering to rat out the mayor and 3 city council members who were in on everything. His lawyer filed papers saying Williams knew about kickbacks from private prisons and could expose the whole system. The FBI found out the corruption went all the way up to state representatives who were getting paid to keep the arrests high. Meanwhile, our white neighbors on Oak started organizing this fundraiser at the Methodist Church to help with our legal bills. They set up tables at the grocery store and the library collecting donations and apologizing for not seeing what was happening. This elderly white couple who lived 3 houses down brought over a check for $5,000 and cried on our porch about believing Dorothy's lies on the neighborhood Facebook page. More neighbors kept showing up with casseroles and money, saying they should have known something was wrong when Dorothy kept posting about suspicious black people. The fundraiser ended up bringing in $50,000 in just 2 weeks from people all over town who felt guilty about staying quiet. Cody's therapy sessions 3 months after everything were getting a little better, but he still had bad nights. The therapist showed us these pictures he drew of our family inside a bubble with words like safe and love written inside. Outside the bubble, he drew people he called the liars, trying to get in but bouncing off. He started sleeping through the night again, but only if we left his door open and the hall light on. The city's lawyers came to Brian's office with a settlement offer of $2 million to make everything go away. Brian sat us down and explained that going to trial could take 3 or 4 years and would mean Cody testifying in court. He said the money was good, but taking it meant we couldn't talk publicly about what happened anymore. We spent a week going back and forth about whether to take it or keep fighting for more. Dorothy's sentencing happened on a Thursday afternoon after the jury found her guilty on every single charge. The judge called her actions a deliberate campaign of racial harassment that endangered a child and corrupted law enforcement. She got 5 years in state prison plus lifetime registration as a hate crime offender, which meant she couldn't go near schools or parks. Dorothy's lawyer tried to argue for probation because of her age, but the judge said her pattern of coaching others made her too dangerous. The courtroom erupted when they led her away in handcuffs while she kept yelling that she was just trying to protect children. Walking out of that courthouse after Dorothy got sentenced, I felt nothing. Just this weird emptiness, like I'd been running on anger for so long that without it, I didn't know what to do with myself. Sharkeisha had these new lines around her eyes that weren't there before all this started, and we'd both catch ourselves jumping whenever someone knocked on the door too loud. Cody still ducked behind us whenever he saw a police car, wouldn't wear his favorite blue shirt anymore because it looked too much like a uniform, and started having accidents at night again after being potty trained for 3 years. 4 months passed before Williams's trial finally started. Federal courthouse downtown. Protesters outside with signs about police accountability, while counter-protesters held thin blue line flags. The prosecutor laid out the charges on day 1. Civil rights violations under color of law, racketeering, conspiracy to violate constitutional rights, looking at 20 years if they got him on everything. Williams sat there in his suit looking smaller than I remembered. No badge or gun to hide behind. Just another defendant at the table while the FBI agents who arrested him sat in the gallery. His defense attorney stood up on day 2 and started painting me as this angry black man who'd been aggressive at the park, claimed I'd threatened the officers, said I had a history of confrontations, even though my only record was a speeding ticket from 2019. Brian was there as a character witness and kept objecting from the gallery until the judge threatened to remove him, but the damage was already getting done, those jurors looking at me different, like maybe I really was dangerous. The prosecutor played the wire recordings Torres had been wearing for months, crystal clear audio of Williams in his office saying he wanted to clean the trash out of Springfield, and everyone knew exactly what kind of trash he meant. Another recording had him telling his nephew on the force to find reasons to pull over any black family in a nice car, check for warrants, make their lives difficult enough that they'd move to another town. Day 3 brought the surprise nobody saw coming when Williams's own daughter Ella took the stand, 28 years old, crying before she even started talking about growing up in that house. She told the jury about Sunday dinners where her dad would rant about how the neighborhood was changing, how he had a whole plan to run for mayor on a law and order platform once he'd driven enough minorities out of Springfield. She had recordings too. Christmas dinner last year where he used the N-word 12 times while carving the turkey, talking about his vision for a whiter Springfield while his grandkids sat right there listening. The FBI agent took the stand next and pulled up Williams's computer files on the courtroom screen, showing this manifesto he'd been writing called Taking Back Our City, with detailed plans for systematic harassment of black and Hispanic families. 10 years of strategy laid out in spreadsheets and flowcharts, which officers to recruit, which judges would look the other way, how to use traffic stops and child services calls to terrorize families into leaving, maps with red dots marking every minority-owned home in Springfield, notes about their jobs, their kids' schools, their daily routines, like he was planning some kind of ethnic cleansing campaign with a badge. When my turn came to testify, I tried to stay strong but broke down describing Cody's nightmares, how he'd wake up screaming that the police were taking Daddy away, how he wouldn't go to the park anymore, wouldn't trust any adult in uniform. The prosecutor showed photos of Cody from before and after, this happy kid on a swing versus this scared little boy who wouldn't leave the house without both parents, and 3 jurors started crying. During a recess on day 4, this black family approached us in the hallway, the Johnsons from the east side, and the dad told me Williams had targeted them for 2 years straight. Their son Deshaun was 17, full ride to Northwestern for engineering, until Williams's cops arrested him 5 times on made-up charges, suspended his license, got him expelled from school when they claimed he had drugs that they obviously planted planted. The kid stood there with his parents looking broken, said he was working at Target now instead of going to college, all because Williams decided their family didn't belong in Springfield. The jury went out after closing arguments and came back in 3 hours, guilty on all 14 counts, consecutive sentences that meant Williams would die in federal prison. He jumped up when they read the verdict, screaming about reverse racism, how this was a witch hunt, how white people were the real victims, had to be dragged out by marshals while still yelling about the war on cops. Williams had this whole manifesto with spreadsheets and red dots on maps. That's not just regular racism. That's like organized, calculated hatred with PowerPoint presentations and everything, which makes me wonder how many other cops knew about this master plan. 2 weeks later, the Department of Justice held a press conference announcing a consent decree for the entire Springfield Police Department, federal oversight for the next 5 years, mandatory bias training, community review boards, body cameras that couldn't be turned off. That night, Sharkeisha and I sat at our kitchen table with all the real estate listings spread out, houses in other states, other cities, anywhere but here. Cody was finally sleeping after weeks of nightmares where cops kept taking Daddy away, and we'd both been getting calls at work, some supportive but plenty threatening. The realtor had already shown us 3 houses near Chicago where nobody would know our story, where Cody could just be a kid at the park without someone calling 911. But something about running felt wrong, like we'd be letting Dorothy and Williams win, letting them drive us out of our own city. The next morning, I walked into the mayor's office and told him I wanted on that new police oversight board they were forming. He looked surprised but signed the paperwork right there, said they needed someone who'd actually been through it. Sharkeisha started meeting with the police academy director about adding trauma training to their program, showing them videos of how Cody still flinched when he saw uniforms. 6 months after that day at the park, Dorothy finally got sentenced after her lawyers ran out of delays and appeals. She stood there crying about being a grandmother, how she was just trying to protect children, but the judge cut her off. He read from her 911 call transcript, all the lies she made up about me dragging Cody from a van, threatening him, being armed, 3 years in federal prison for false imprisonment, civil rights violations, and conspiracy. Plus, she had to pay us $200,000 in damages. Williams got his sentencing 2 weeks later in federal court, and they had to bring extra security because his cop buddies were protesting outside. The prosecutor laid out everything, the recording devices, the planted evidence, the families he'd destroyed over 20 years of running that department like his personal kingdom. When they announced 18 years, he jumped up and started screaming at me, had to be dragged out by federal marshals. As they pulled him past our row, he stared right at me and mouthed the words clearly enough that Sharkeisha grabbed my hand. The city council met that same week and passed new rules that made Springfield one of the strictest cities for false police reports. Every 911 call about suspicious people had to go through a supervisor who'd ask specific questions about actual crimes being committed. False reports now meant mandatory jail time, minimum 30 days, and you had to pay for all the police resources you wasted. They named it Cody's Law, and my son was there when the mayor signed it, even got to keep the pen. Detective Torres showed up at our door 8 months after everything started, wearing a suit instead of a uniform. He'd made detective after testifying against Williams, but you could see the weight of it on him, how the other cops treated him like a traitor. He sat on our porch and apologized for not speaking up sooner, for all the times he'd watched Williams destroy families and stayed quiet. Said he was running training sessions now, teaching cops how to step in when they see abuse of power happening. Cody watched him from behind the screen door the whole time, still not ready to trust any cop completely. The adoption papers had been in limbo since Dorothy's arrest, some bureaucratic mess about verifying our fitness as parents after being involved in a criminal case. 8 months after that day at the park, we finally got called back to family court for the refinalization hearing. The judge, an older black woman who'd been following our case, apologized for what the system had put us through. She signed the papers and then did something I'd never seen, came down from the bench to hug Cody and tell him he had brave parents. We used part of our settlement money to start the Family Defense Fund, specifically for families facing discrimination in custody or adoption cases. Brian agreed to run it pro bono, said it was the least he could do after seeing what we went through. Within 3 months, we'd helped 12 families, mostly mixed-race adoptions or foster situations where someone decided to play vigilante. The fund paid for lawyers, private investigators, even therapy for kids traumatized by false reports. A year after that day at the park, the documentary about our case aired on national TV. The filmmaker had interviewed everyone, even got Dorothy talking from prison about how she still thought she did the right thing. Watching ourselves on screen brought it all back. Cody crying while I was in cuffs, Dorothy's lies, Williams threatening me. But seeing the whole story laid out, how it exposed decades of corruption, made the trauma feel like it meant something. The documentary won 3 awards and got shown in police academies across the country. Springfield elected its first black police chief 2 months after the documentary aired, a reform candidate who'd been fighting the Williams family for years. Chief Jackson made it his first priority to personally apologize to every family the Williams crew had targeted. He came to our house with no cameras, no press, just him in regular clothes saying those 2 words Dorothy and Williams never could. He implemented monthly community meetings where anyone could report problems directly to him, bypassing the whole chain of command. The city held a healing event at the same park where everything happened. 500 people showing up to support families affected by police discrimination. They asked me to speak, and I stood at that same playground where I'd been arrested, looking at the bench where Dorothy had made that call. I talked about choosing to stay and fight instead of running, about Cody learning that good people stand up to bad systems. Cody stood next to me the whole time, not hiding anymore, and when I finished, he grabbed the microphone himself. "My daddy is brave and good," he said, his voice carrying across the whole crowd. 14 months passed, and the park installed a brand new playground where everything had happened. The city invited us to the ribbon-cutting ceremony, and Cody ran straight for the monkey bars without hesitation. Other families watched us play together, and nobody called the cops this time. The news covered it as a story of healing, but I just wanted my kid to enjoy the slides again. Dorothy's husband filed for divorce from his prison cell 2 weeks after that ceremony. The local paper ran his statement calling her actions disgusting and saying he never knew about her lies. Her own daughter stopped visiting her in county jail and moved out of state with the grandkids. Her sister told reporters the whole family was ashamed of what Dorothy had done to us. Sharkeisha finally went back to day shift at the hospital after 18 months of night work. Her co-workers threw her a welcome back party, and the chief of medicine apologized for not supporting her sooner. She could pick up Cody from school again and help with homework like a normal mom. The FBI expanded their investigation into 3 neighboring counties and found the same pattern everywhere. They used our case as the main example in their federal corruption report that went to Congress. 27 more officers got arrested across the region for similar schemes against minority families. Cody started 2nd grade at a new school with better diversity diversity training for staff and students. He made 3 best friends the first week, and they all came to our house for playdates. His teacher said he was the most caring kid in class, always helping others feel included. I wrote about everything for the Washington Post, and it went viral within hours. Thousands of parents messaged me with their own stories of being accused while parenting their kids. Some were adoptive families like us, but others were mixed-race biological families facing the same harassment. We started family therapy together to work through what happened to us. The therapist had Cody draw pictures of our family, and he stopped putting protective circles around us. Now he just drew us holding hands under a rainbow with big smiles on all our faces. Torres got promoted to head the new Community Relations Division after getting a commendation. He visited us to apologize again for having to arrest me that day, even though he knew it was wrong. He said our case changed how the whole department handles bias complaints in family situations. 2 years after that terrible day, we threw Cody's 8th birthday party at the same park. Kids from his class came, all different colors and backgrounds, playing together without anyone caring who matched. When he blew out his candles, he said he wished no other kids would get scared like he was. His friends cheered and ate cake while their parents talked about normal stuff like soccer practice. The next morning, I pushed him on those same swings where the nightmare had started. He pumped his legs and laughed, asking me to push him higher like any other kid would. Other families played around us, nobody staring, nobody judging, nobody calling anyone about anything suspicious. The park had become just a park again, not a crime scene or a news story or a symbol. Cody jumped off at the highest point and landed in the sand, then ran back for another turn. We stayed until lunch, him playing and me watching from the bench where Dorothy had sat. But now it was just a bench where a dad could sit and watch his son be happy and free. Well, folks, that's where we close this chapter of commentary together. Thanks for sticking around while I tossed in my 2 cents. Like the video, it helps more than you think.